What's going on, guys, and welcome to episode 504 of #AskGSM here today for Wednesday, July 26, 2023. I am Graham GSM Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well, having a great week so far. If you want to send in a question to the show, you can do so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the #AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews. Drop your question on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not on the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video. I'll include your question in next week's edition. We'll get right into it here. We got a ton of questions to get into, a ton of questions from all three platforms. Starting with YouTube, Micah Does It. Their first question was kind of a wide range of questions this week. His first question was, if you ran for president against Joe Biden next year and won, first of all, who the fuck would vote for me? He says, what would you do as president for the next 4 years? I think my only answer is I would hire someone that knows what they're doing. And that's not to say that Joe Biden does or doesn't know what he's doing currently, but he obviously knows what he's doing more than I do. So I think me running this company, what am I, fucking Vince McMahon? Country would be a disaster. I'll tell you that right now. For anyone who listens to this show, enjoys the show, likes my booking ideas, nothing would ever get done in this country if I was running it. I'll tell you that right now. We would, I don't even know. It would be wrestling centric. Everyone would have to walk into every room with entrance music. I mean, that would be the best part of the job for me. If I was going to do, political hearings or something like that, I would walk into every room with entrance music. Beyond that, as far as laws and policies, I have no fucking really clue what any of that would entail. So I would have to bring someone in that would know what they're doing. So obviously I would hire The Rock. No, I kid. I honestly have no clue. I really, if you're looking for like a legitimate answer as far as like, oh, I would institute this policy or this law, then I have no fucking clue. Cut back on the guns, I'll tell you that much. We can go with a lot less hate in this country than we do currently. Not that Joe Biden isn't taking strides to crack down on that, or isn't or is. Again, I can't really comment on that because I'm not too politically informed as much as I probably should be. But just some of the stuff that I see daily probably could be cut back on, specifically when it comes to guns and stuff like that, and all the shootings that we have constantly. On a serious note, it's pretty fucking disgusting. That stuff is still happening on a regular basis, even in 2023. But yeah, probably just pass it on to someone that has better ideas and a better idea of what they're doing than I would. His next question, I had a friend ask me what match should he watch because he's trying to get into wrestling. I told him CM Punk versus John Cena at Money in the Bank 2011. What match would you recommend? That's a great question. I'm sure I've answered this before. I would probably recommend Punk and Cena from Money in the Bank 2011. It's my favorite match of all time. I would still say to this day. A great show, a great match with a great story is the key. It's not just a great match. Like, there was a million great matches you could show anyone. But you need a great match with a great story. And the best part about that match is that you don't have to go back and watch the 4 weeks of Raw leading up to it. The video package that plays right before the match encompasses everything you need to know about that story. So that would probably be my top choice. The other two that come to mind are also WWE matches. Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, two people that most people, non-wrestling fans, will probably know. From WrestleMania 17, again, great feud, great video package, great story, shock ending, hot crowd. The only issue with showing someone something from that long ago, from over 20 years ago, is the issue that the product is not nearly as hot now as it was back then. Now, obviously, the product is hot, arguably now, compared to like with crowd reactions, and the product is better now than it was even a couple of years ago in terms of like merchandise and some ratings and by metrics of that standard. But I mean, it's not the Attitude Era. We're not getting crowds of that size for the most part. We're not getting that same enthusiasm from audiences. We don't have stars the caliber of Rock and Austin around today. So the issue is when you go back and show people the old stuff, not the old good stuff, because I'm not going to say the Attitude Era. I'm not a big Attitude Era guy personally. But with stuff like that specifically, like Rock and Austin, you're not going to get stars on that same level today. And maybe you do. Maybe people look at Austin and Rock the same way they do Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes. I don't know. I wouldn't think so, but it's hard to say. But that match, and also Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker from WrestleMania 25 in 2009. Again, kind of the same thing. A great match, but also with a great story, with the video package kind of encompassing that. You have this guy that, the ultimate foil for the man that's been undefeated at WrestleMania for nearly 20 years at that point. Just a great match. Heaven versus hell, that whole dynamic. Just amazing. So, and a great crowd to boot in Texas at WrestleMania 25. Those would be my top 3 choices. I guess you could show them stuff from AEW as well, or New Japan. That might be a more popular choice with you, but those would probably be my 3 go-to matches for anyone either trying to get into wrestling or doesn't know anything about wrestling and would like to give it a shot and see like what makes the magic so great. What is there to like about wrestling? I don't get wrestling. Maybe after watching those matches, they might get it. Some people will just never get it, and that's fine. But I feel like those 3 matches kind of perfectly encompass what wrestling is all about and what makes it so great on occasion. Their third question, Micah's third question, with the movie and TV writers going on strike, will we see The Rock, John Cena, and Batista return to wrestling in the next few months since they aren't filming anything right now? I'm actually going to write an article about this for tomorrow. I was already planning on that, but it's possible. I'm not saying it will happen. Do I expect it? No. We just saw Cena come back for a random return of Money in the Bank, so really anything is possible. But I would have to imagine Cena and definitely Batista are more available than The Rock is. The Rock, even if he's not filming anything, has probably got a million different projects going on at any one time. And if The Rock were to come back, and again, I'm going to write a whole article about this for tomorrow, I just don't think, like, if he were to come back, he would probably just do a quick segment. I don't think he's coming back for a full run because you don't know when the strike's going to be over. It could be over soon. It could be over in a couple of months. He's not going to commit to a full-on run heading into WrestleMania. I mean, he's not going to come back for more than one match anyway, I would assume. But he's not going to commit to a full-on run, and then the strike is over, and then he has to go back to filming stuff. And then you don't get to the end of the run. Same thing with Cena and Batista. Batista's done. Batista's not wrestling anymore. He's made that quite clear. He's going to stay true to his word. I know everyone says that, but if Batista is to be believed in just hearing him talk about it, he does not want to tarnish his retirement from 2019. He could come back for an appearance, which we have not seen in over 4 years, which I'm all for. We haven't seen Batista in a WWE ring in, over 4 years, since WrestleMania 35. He was supposed to go into the Hall of Fame a couple different times. He couldn't make it. So we will see Batista back on WWE TV again as far as a Hall of Fame induction, but for a one-off return on Raw or a pay-per-view, I feel like that's possible. He has said before that he would come back for the occasional appearance. So far, he hasn't. I mean, we ran into COVID. He's been busy since COVID kind of ended. But he has said that he would come back for an appearance. And I would love to see him come back, just hit a Batista bomb on someone, whatever, like a Raw reunion show, which we haven't had in a while, which is a good thing. Cena, we just saw come back on Money in the Bank. Cena is the most likely out of all 3 to come back for an actual run, as far as like build up to one pay-per-view, put this guy over, beat this guy, whatever. Kind of like what we saw at WrestleMania, although he barely showed up on the road to WrestleMania. He had that one interaction with Theory on Raw, did not show up again until Mania itself, had a subpar match and lost. I mean, it kind of sucked. I mean, it was seen as worst run in quite some time. But yeah, I would probably say it's possible. Am I expecting it? No. A Rock return at SummerSlam would be great because I'm going to be there. And I have yet to see The Rock as like the one person I have never seen in person before at a wrestling show. Really just in general, but The Rock is the one name I have never seen make a return, make an appearance at any big show. Of all the big names, Cena, Roman, like everyone on the current roster, Hogan, Stone Cold, The Rock is like the one guy I have never seen in person. Even Batista, I saw his final match at WrestleMania 35. I would love to see The Rock come back for a one-off return. For a full-on run with Roman Reigns, but I feel like we're kind of past that, and that ship sailed a while ago. That ship probably sailed to WrestleMania 39 earlier this year. Central Man Network, their first question was, again, another random question, but are you a fan of the Nightmare on Elm Street films? I'm not. I actually kind of prefer, I would probably go Halloween first, because I've seen all the recent Halloween movies, but I've also gone back and watched some of the older ones. And then I would go Friday the 13th. I don't know if I've seen more Friday the 13th movies or Halloween movies. I haven't even seen the original Friday the 13th, but I've seen enough sequels. I saw the remake, but I also saw the New York one. I watched one a couple of months ago. I don't know if it was 7 or 8 or I don't know. I watched Jason X too. 2 years ago, which was fucking awful, but, it was fun. I think it was one of the worst ones, but it was also so bad it was good. It was that type of deal. Yeah, I'm not a big Freddy Krueger fan. I did watch Freddy vs. Jason. I have seen that. I enjoyed that. It wasn't amazing, but it was, none of those movies are really amazing. But I enjoyed that. I have seen the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street from whatever year, 2000 and 8, 9, 10, I don't remember. But whatever the more recent one was from like 10, 15 years ago, I have seen that with my friend. I don't know if I've seen any of the originals. I've seen clips of them. I just don't really care for them. I prefer Halloween and Friday the 13th personally over Nightmare on Elm Street. His second question, do you see Darby Allin winning the AEW World Championship in the future, or do you think he's not world title worthy? I do. I do think he will win the World Championship. Honestly, I have said this before. I do think he can be. He's capable of being the one to beat MJF for the AEW World Championship. Do I think it will happen? I'm not sure. I want him to be that one to beat MJF for the championship. I'm not convinced that it will be, just because of how he's been booked. I mean, he's right back in the TNT title picture. It's just not ideal. I mean, we've seen him in the TNT title picture a million fucking times. Him and Luchasaurus, who gives a shit? I don't really care. I don't want to see that as a full-fledged feud for the next month. Him and Christian Cage, maybe, but him and Luchasaurus, I mean, he is the actual champion. I don't really want to see that, so I know he kind of got a shot already at Double or Nothing. I want to see a one-on-one match again between MJF and Darby Allin, playing off their feud from 2021 with the whole headlock takeover thing, the brass fucking ring, all that other dumb shit. So, I don't know. I would personally want to see Darby Allin be the one to beat MJF. I don't think it's going to happen. Can he be world champion in the future? I do. I mean, he's over enough. He's good enough. He's been there since day one. He's a homegrown talent. So, yes, I do think it can happen. I do think it will happen. I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think they have to worry about, oh, he's only got 2 years left on his deal. He might go to WWE. You can worry about that with MJF. You can worry about that even with the Elite or Wardlow. Darby Allin has made it clear. Wardlow has said it like a time or two. Allin has said in every fucking interview he has ever done that he is not going anywhere. WWE would not give him the creative freedom that he wants and be able to, that artistic freedom to kind of be himself and do dumb shit. I mean, let's be honest. He's only going to get that in AEW and the platform that AEW has. So I don't think he's going anywhere. And I do think it's more a matter of when and not if he becomes world champion. It might not be for a while, but personally, I would like to see him be the one to beat MJF, ultimately for the AEW World Championship, probably later on in the year. Let's see. Cade B from YouTube. I believe that's how you pronounce her name. If not, I apologize. Their question was, fantasy booking scenario. Team WWE versus Team AEW. Team versus Team NXT versus Team Impact. 5-man Survivor Series teams. Build the teams, and if you want, pick a winner. I typically don't do this sort of stuff because the whole fantasy booking thing sometimes could take a lot longer to do than it is to just kind of answer. But I thought, thinking of the top 5 people I would want to see from each company be on these teams wasn't too difficult. So I actually did put together some teams here. I mean, 4 5-man teams sounds like a fucking disaster. We did get 3 5-man teams back in 2019 at Survivor Series. 4 5-man teams would be just a mess. But these would be my teams. For Team WWE, I picked Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes, Gunther, and AJ Styles. I'm not really sure who else you would put in there. I mean, I guess you could put Bobby Lashley or LA Knight. Those are the 5 guys that I picked. Team AEW, MJF, Adam Cole, Kenny Omega, Bryan Danielson, and CM Punk. Again, AEW, I felt like there were more people I could put in there, like Hangman or Moxley. Moxley was kind of like one of the day oneers, so I mean, I guess you could put him in there, but I wanted Punk on the team. Danielson already kind of fulfilled like the Blackpool Combat Club vibe, so I picked one person from Elite, one person from BCC. MJF and Cole are current partners, but in the long run, they're not going to be partners for that much longer. And then Punk, I just enjoy. So I think AEW had more choices, but I like the team that I put together there. For NXT, Carmelo Hayes, Braun Breaker, and Wesley. This is where I kind of go, they don't have as stacked of a roster as they did even a year or two ago, because you could put Waller on that team, but he's moved up. A lot of the people that were like the homegrown NXT talent have moved up, but I picked Carmelo Hayes, Braun Breaker, Wesley, Ilya Dragunov, and Dijak. You could have I was almost thinking of putting on Tyler Bate, but I like Dijak on the team as well, so a little bit of everything on that team. And then for Team Impact, Josh Alexander, Moose, Eddie Edwards, and the Motor City Machine Guns. Impact is a great roster, too. There's a couple different people you could swap in and out for Team Impact. They just got Leo Rush. I mean, Leo Rush just arrived, though, so I probably wouldn't put him on the team. He's not that big of a star. I was also thinking of Trey Miguel. Trey Miguel is great. He's had a couple different great runs as X Division champion. I like ABC, which I fucking hate the name. It's so dumb. But Bullet Club's East Austin and Chris Bay. They're great. You could put them on the team. But I like the team I put together. Moose brings the power. Eddie Edwards is like the heart and soul of Impact. Motor City Machine Guns have been with TNA for like 20 years, so you could probably put them on the team. And then Josh Alexander is just kind of like their poster child right now. So, yeah, I feel comfortable with all four of those teams. Who would win? Probably Team AEW. I feel like Team AEW is more stacked than the rest of them. Team NXT would go first, then Impact, probably. Maybe Impact first because no one cares about Impact, even though they have a great team / roster. It would really come down to Team AEW and Team WWE. I would probably go, I mean, either team you can go either way with, and they're both great. I don't know if Roman Reigns is getting pinned, so Team WWE might have to win. But Team AEW is pretty stacked as well. JJF from YouTube, their first question was, how much does overness factor into being ready for a main event spot? Is it better to strike while the iron is hot with someone like Hook or Dominic Mysterio, even when they aren't good enough in the ring for that spot? It does factor in, but you got to remember that when it comes to stuff like that, it does factor. But I feel like it does factor in the sense that you have to remember what spot they're ready for, if that makes sense. So, like, for example, like you mentioned, Hook. When Hook first arrives on the scene, I feel like he's kind of cooled off a little bit just because they just haven't had anything for him to do, really, for, like, the last year as FTW champion, that old fucking pointless title. But with Hook, when he arrived on the scene, I mean, I don't know how many people were saying to that point, because he was really, really over when he first made his in-ring debut. I don't know how many people were saying, put him in the main event scene. I mean, if there were people like that, then they're fucking foolish, because that would have been very dumb for them to do. But you should, I mean, Hook was not remotely ready for really anything at that point. You have to book them accordingly. Like, you didn't mention LA Knight, but LA Knight is really over right now. LA Knight is ready for the main event scene. I mean, you could put him in the United States Championship scene and build him up a little bit. But he's also old enough and he's been around the block. I know the main event scene in Impact and NWA is not the same as the main event scene in WWE. But LA Knight is good enough to where I feel like he could be in the main event scene tomorrow and thrive immediately. But people like Hook and Dominic Mysterio are not ready for that spot. Dominic Mysterio had probably one of Wesley's weaker NXT title, I mean, probably the weakest North American Championship defense that he's ever had when he won the belt last week. Dominic Mysterio is great. He's improved a lot. He is great in the heel role, but I would not put him in the main event. You have to remember, like, what spot they're good for. Dominic has enough heat and is really over. But if he doesn't really fill or check the other boxes, like being ready in the ring, then he might be over enough for a mid-card title spot. Like, you kind of have to know, all right, where are their other skills at and what else could they be ready for? LA Knight is over, but he's also good enough. He's not like Bret Hart in the ring, but he's competent enough in the ring and great enough on the mic where he could be ready for a main event run tomorrow, I would say. But Hook, I mean, the guy's just getting started. The kid's just getting started. He might be ready for a mid-card title run. I mean, for him, I felt like he was ready enough to be pushed further up the card and not just on the undercard. He's over, okay, do something with him. Push him in like the tag team title scene or the mid-card title scene or Atlantic Championship or something like that. I mean, move beyond the FTW title bullshit. And we're finally, hopefully moving closer to that because he finally lost the FTW title. If he gets it back, then all hope is lost and it's fucking pointless. And that's just his little spot that he'll be in, which is a waste. But Dominic, I don't know if he'll ever be a world champion. Just because Dominic isn't that great in the ring. Maybe he'll improve to that point where he is ready. I mean, he's been wrestling now for 3 years. You would think he'd be probably better in the ring now than he is currently. I mean, he's better than he was at that point, but he's also not that great. I don't clamor for a Dominic Mysterio match. Like, him and Ray at WrestleMania was great. Him and Cody Rhodes was kind of boring. Him and Wesley was not a great match. So, you know, he's over for this. He's like over enough for this mid-card title spot that he has right now as a North American champion. I mean, if Gunther wasn't the Intercontinental Champion, I mean, that's obviously the answer there is no. But if it was some other random mid-card babyface, then yeah, putting the Intercontinental Championship on him would be fine. I don't see him as a world champion right now, maybe not ever. Hook, I don't see as a world champion, not now, maybe not ever. But you have to remember, okay, you should strike when the iron is hot when someone is over. But you have to remember how over is this person in terms of like what spot could they be good for. Santino Marella was super over at many points in his WWE career. Should he have ever been a world champion? Fuck no, that would have been stupid. But you could put the mid-card championship on him, which they did. He was the Intercontinental Champion. He was a United States Champion. He had a lot of success. He was a tag team champion. And they knew to kind of capitalize with Santino at certain points. just because someone is really over doesn't mean you should automatically push them to the main event. His next question is the recording equipment on? Did you double check? I did not double check, and that's a problem. Checking right now, and it is on. That is good. And it is timely that you say that. First of all, you should send in questions every week to remind me, because I do often forget. I forgot what I was recording last week. It wasn't hashtag. It was something else. I think it was a review. Maybe I think it was the Dark Side, actually. It was my Dark Side of the Ring review a couple days ago. I think it just didn't record. I don't know if I didn't press record or it just stopped after a certain point or just never recorded to begin with. I got 10 minutes in, and then I had to stop for something, and then I got back in it. I hit record again. And for some reason, after a couple minutes, I think I fucked up. I wasn't finished, but I fucked up, and I looked back to pause it, but it wasn't even recording. So I should check more often than I do, because I am really playing. I'm really risking it here by not looking more, looking more often than I do, because I'm really risking ruining the whole episode and doing it all over again. So yes, thank you for the reminder. I did check. We'll check one more time, and it is recording. So that's a positive sign. Thank you, JJF. Nike only from YouTube. After Cody Rhodes ends his feud with Brock Lesnar, what's next? That's the $1 million question. I mean, it's not going to be Roman Reigns. I don't think the Roman Reigns match at this point, now that it's not happening at SummerSlam, is not going to happen until WrestleMania. I don't think it should happen until WrestleMania. But then the question becomes, what the fuck do you do with him in the meantime? I mean, I don't really want to see him chase the Intercontinental Championship, but him and Gunther would be a fresh feud. They have history from earlier on in January. I also don't want Cody to be the one to beat Gunther for that Intercontinental Championship. It would be a great feud. I feel like Drew's probably taking the title anyway at SummerSlam, so it probably doesn't even matter. The answer would probably be Randy Orton. Randy should probably come back as a heel. I'm sorry, as a babyface, because he's been gone for so long. People miss Randy Orton. They like Randy Orton. He was really over as it was even before he left. Maybe at some point he can turn heel. A Cody Orton feud would be great. Right away, though, I'm not sure if that's the option or that's the direction to go in, just because Orton is so beloved that probably wouldn't work. It would probably get Cody booed if we're being honest. So maybe down the road you can do that. But right away after SummerSlam, I'm not sure. The funny thing I would say, obviously he shouldn't win it, but it would make sense to have him go after Rollins and have him chase the World Heavyweight Championship. I mean, I know that's not finishing the story, and it's not, but what else is there to vie for on Raw? And I would say Dominic Mysterio, but he already beat Dominic Mysterio. If Dominic beat him at Money in the Bank, which he shouldn't have, but if he did, then you could have him go after Dominic, avenge that loss, because that was a short feud. It was a mini feud for Money in the Bank, but he already beat Dominic clean, so there's really no reason to go back to that or continue that. It probably would be Rollins. The funny thing is what I was going to say a minute ago, is that he just did an interview, promoting this big documentary coming out next week on Peacock, which I'm looking forward to, Becoming Cody Rhodes. He just said he doesn't want to face Seth Rollins. He doesn't. I think he said he doesn't want to face Rollins ever again. I didn't read the full quote. I didn't read the full interview. But maybe it's because those matches were so great, he never wants to revisit that because he feels like those matches are perfect. And if that's the case, I would agree. But at the same time, you probably should run it back at some point because there is a story to tell there with Rollins never having beaten Cody. And that could be the justification alone. Because remember, I mean, the funny thing, again, he says this in interviews. But in storyline, he confronted Rollins. The Raw after Money in the Bank, Rollins was cutting a promo, and Cody came out, and that was never revisited again, because I think Brock beat him up or whatever. So when he beats Brock, hopefully, he should go after the World Heavyweight Championship. Again, he should not win, but it would make sense for him to face Rollins and say, listen, I beat you 3 times, I've beaten Brock, it's time for me to earn a championship opportunity. And then he loses, and Rollins finally gets one over on Cody. Maybe you can, to kind of stretch it out a little bit, Cody should never beat Rollins for that championship. But maybe they could have a match at the September pay-per-view. It ends in a draw. Because WWE doesn't do draws. I mean, a double countout would be lame. The problem is that WWE doesn't do time limits. A time limit draw would be great. Like Cody Rhodes had a few of those in AEW. I don't think that's going to happen in WWE. Although that would be ideal, though. And then from there, you can have them have another match at the October pay-per-view. I think it's Payback in September. And then October is Fastlane, which is so fucking dumb. But you can have them have another match in October, and then maybe that's where Rollins finally beats Cody. And then from there, I really don't know. I'm not really sure what you would do with them. Maybe by that point, Gunther is an Intercontinental Champion. They can have a little mini feud. Like, Cody already faced the top 2 heels on Raw. I mean, him and Balor maybe, but I feel like we've seen that match enough to where it's not really an attraction anymore. Him and Damian Priest, I mean, maybe, but he's already beaten these guys. He's already feuded on and off with Judgment Day on TV to the point where I don't really think that's a big enough feud to kind of keep him busy in the meantime. Gunther is really the only other option. Raw doesn't have a whole lot of other heels. Him and Miz, fuck no. I mean, we've seen that enough anyway. Who else does Raw even really have aside from those guys? I don't know. Unless someone turns, maybe by that point Orton's back and he can turn heel. I mean, that's an option, I suppose. Maybe you kick him over to SmackDown at that point. I wouldn't think so. I feel like that might be a little too soon. I'm not really sure how they get to Cody and Roman at WrestleMania. Maybe Cody might have to win the Rumble again, which people probably would not be happy with, but that's another option. So I'm not really sure. But yeah, as far as after this feud with Brock, I would say Rollins. I know you said otherwise, but it would probably, storyline-wise, make sense. What is he going to come out on Raw and say, listen, I don't want your world championship? I mean, it's true, but it would demean that championship and just kind of further illustrate that the top title that he wants is the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. He's not going to do that. So no, him and Rollins would make the most sense coming at his SummerSlam, probably for the fall pay-per-views. Next question from Noel from Facebook. Thoughts on Dominic Mysterio being NXT North American Champion? Someone else asked about this at Uwagu91 as well. I already answered this last week. I got a couple questions about it last week as well. And I've kind of given it more time. I wasn't really sold one way or the other last week on whether it was a good idea or if I liked it, or if I liked the idea of him being NXT North American Champion. I do like it. I mean, he has another championship defense on NXT Great American Bash on Sunday against Wesley and Mustafa Ali. I thought it would be him and Ali one-on-one. I'm glad it's not, because that wouldn't make much sense. Ali's kind of a heel. He's a tweener, whatever. I hope Wesley doesn't get the championship back by pinning Ali. I just feel like it would be too soon. If that's the case, and it was only a 1-week experiment to get the belt on Raw and on SmackDown for like a week, then that would be a fucking waste. Give it some more time. Have him reign as champion for a little while. Build it up enough to where when he eventually loses that championship, it means something. Kind of like what the Charlotte Flair the NXT Women's Championship run should have been in 2020. Like, they could have done that with her. She had matches with Io Sky and Rhea and Mia Yim, but it just wasn't that good of a run, and it was during COVID, and no one really cared, and she didn't really help the division at all. So, I don't know. I would kind of stray away from that. But with Dominic, I feel like it has potential. He's already defended the championship on Raw and on SmackDown. Don't overexpose the kid, but, give him more regular defenses and stuff like that. And when it comes time for him to lose it, it will be a meaningful moment for whoever beats him for that championship. And also, he's got to get pinned too, whether it be by Wesley or someone else. If he just goes in there and loses it in a triple threat like Charlotte did, which was another issue with her reign, she never really put over anyone on her way out. She lost the title in a triple threat, but it was Io that pinned Rhea Ripley. So Charlotte never factored into the equation, and Charlotte never showed up in NXT again. That was fucking lame. Hopefully with Dominic, it's the same thing. We have another triple threat on Sunday. I would hope he doesn't lose the belt there, because then it would just be a waste. Wesley's 8-month run ended for that. No thanks. Keep the belt on Dominic. Give NXT more exposure on the main roster. I think that's a good idea. And then maybe Wesley beats Dominic for it on Raw or a pay-per-view or something. I feel like that'd be the way to go. Their next question, who should be the one to beat Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship? I've answered this many times before. My answer always changes. I mean, I don't think it should be Drew. I don't think Drew really gains anything from winning the Intercontinental Championship back. I know it was the first title that he held in the main roster back in 2009. I know all that, but I'm just thinking, I don't know. I'd rather see someone benefit from being the first one to beat Gunther for that title. He's been built up so much. He's gone undefeated on the main roster for this long. Drew doesn't really gain anything. It would give him something to do, but he doesn't really gain anything from that. So I hope that's not what they're going for here. I'd rather see it be someone like a Johnny Gargano who can benefit big time. I mean, they got to get the guy in fucking TV first, but I think they're headed to a DIY reunion at some point. Ciampa's a babyface. How do you not do that? So it probably won't be Gargano. Riddle would have been fine, but Riddle already lost a couple times, so it won't be Riddle. I'm not really sure who else there even is on the Raw roster, unless they call up someone new, like an Ilya Dragunov or something. That would be sick, but he's probably staying in NXT for a little bit longer. I really don't know. I just don't like the idea of it being Drew. Drew winning it would make for a cool moment, but I just feel like they can maximize that moment by giving that big win to someone who could use it and really put them over. It's the same thing with the Roman Reigns thing. I think Roman Reigns losing to someone that's already established. I mean, Cody at this point is established. He's over. But Cody's never been a world champion before in WWE. Like, Drew's been the fucking world champion. He's been the Intercontinental Champion. The Sheamus thing, yeah, he was already established, but the story there with Sheamus was that he had never held that championship before, and it meant something for him to win that championship. For Drew, he's already been that champion before. He doesn't need that title. Sheamus, it would have been a great moment, but they kind of fucked that up. Honestly, my answer is still Sheamus. I don't know how you can get back to that. They can't. They're on separate brands, but at the same time, we've seen stranger things happen. So I would stick with Sheamus, even though I know that's not going to happen. I'm an idiot. I'm an optimistic fool, but I would stick with Sheamus as being the one to beat Gunther for that championship at some point and kind of go full circle with that story. At Reborn Again, John Ritland from the Twitter machine and on YouTube, Real Honesty with John Ritland. A lot of movie reviews, a lot of great content. Check them out. His first question was, so how full do you expect Ford Field to be for SummerSlam, he asks. Close to Mania 23, or will they inflate the numbers to beat that total? I don't think they're going to beat Mania 23. I mean, it's SummerSlam and Mania are two very different things. That was 16 years ago. I mean, they do a lot of great attendance numbers now, but the product was just hotter then than it was now. And again, it's WrestleMania. So will they inflate the numbers to beat that total? I'm not sure if they'll even do that. I think I had seen the other day they're doing 45,000 they've already sold 45,000 tickets for SummerSlam. What did WrestleMania 23 do? I'm looking it up right now. WrestleMania 23. The answer is no. 80,000? No way. No, there's no way did they do 80. I mean, it says disputed in as every fucking attendance number is in WWE. Every WWE attendance number is disputed these days, and it has been for a long time. I'm saying there's no way that they even come close to that. Like I said, I think they sold 45,000 tickets. I could see them bumping it up to 60. That's just what they do. They like to argue, oh, it's part of the show. I mean, I don't know how that's part of the show. Who gives a shit? It's an attendance number. It's just to make them look more impressive than they are. 45,000 is not a bad number. But they like to pump it up to like, oh, we did like 10,000 more than we actually did, which is kind of a big difference. I mean, I don't really care one way or the other. It's just kind of funny. They do that with every pay-per-view. No, they will not. I can't imagine they're going to say that there's 80,000 people there, 80,200 as opposed to 80,100 that Mania 23 did. For SummerSlam 2023, that would be ridiculous. That would be boosting the number by like 30,000 people. That would be stupid. And they can't expect there to be more people for SummerSlam than there would be for a Mania anyway. So I think 45 to 50,000 for that pay-per-view next weekend is a good enough number. They'll probably announce it as 60, 65,000 because again, that's just what they do. But 45 and 50,000 for a SummerSlam is nothing to be ashamed of. That's a pretty good number, I would say. John's second question, so about last week's Blood and Guts match, did it really need all those weapons when the 10 participants were surrounded by a weapon? That being a cage. No, it didn't, but again, it's Blood and Guts, so I'm not upset at it. I'm not disappointed. I'm not surprised. Blood and Guts is exactly what they would expect. It really is the definition of putting a hat on a hat. Like, do you really need all those weapons when you already have the cage? The answer is no. I'm good with a couple weapons, but like the 10,000 nails or whatever, the bed of 1,000 nails is fucking stupid. I think my bigger problem is this. I'd be more okay. I mean, I enjoyed the match. I was there live. It was quite the spectacle. The crowd loved it, whatever. I would be more okay with the shit they did in that match if they only saved it for Blood and Guts. The problem is that they do that dumb shit almost every week, if not every other week in AEW television. Whether it be a street fight, or a this match, or a that match. You know, flaming barbed wire this, or whatever, barbed wire massacre. They do matches like this every other fucking week on the show. On pay-per-views, on Dynamite, Rampage. I mean, at this point, what does it even mean? The Blood and Guts match is cool, and it was a fun match last week. But like the weapons themselves, they do it so fucking often. Everyone bleeds so often. It doesn't mean anything in Blood and Guts, as much as it should, at least to me. Again, it was a big match and I enjoyed it. But I just feel like they should save that stuff for this match and not do it so often. They do no DQ matches as often as Impact did 10 years ago. Like, oh, Monsters Ball this week. No DQ this week. No holds barred. Like, if you do it every other week, it doesn't mean anything. And it's just stupid. I'm not a big, hardcore wrestling. No, I'm a hardcore wrestling fan, but I'm not like a trash can wrestling fan anyway. As far as like I like the no DQ stuff every week and the hardcore matches and what GCW does. I hate that bullshit. I mean, but if it's done once in a while, I'm okay with it. This isn't once in a while. What we saw last week, we see all the time in AEW, so it just doesn't mean anything, or at least as much as it should. At Iwagu91 from Twitter, already asked about Dominic, but his other questions were, your thoughts on Alpha Academy now being faces? I think it's cool that they're organically turning them face, because they were over enough in that role to why not just embrace it, which they are. Chad Gable's great. Otis has gotten back over. They got Maxine Dupree in their corner, which has been a nice touch. I don't know how good that Valhalla Maxine Dupree match next week is going to be. I would rather the feud just end, but it seems like it's not over. It isn't over because they're having a match next week, unfortunately. That match sounds like it's going to be fucking awful. But we'll give her a chance. We'll see how she does, I guess, and then we could shit on it afterward. But yeah, I like Alpha Academy as babyfaces. They're over in that role. And I know it would be two babyface teams, but again, I've also argued DIY and Owens and Zayn should be a match or feud at some point. Alpha Academy against Owens and Zayn would be great. Owens is currently hurt, I think, with a broken rib. So hopefully he's not out for too long. And that's why they kind of wrote him off on Monday's Raw. But at some point, that's a match we haven't gotten yet. We've gotten Owens and Zayn against Pretty Deadly and, Street Profits and Judgment Day and the Usos. We haven't gotten Owens and Zayn against Alpha Academy yet. And I feel like that'd be a great match. Owens has had matches with like Otis and Chad Gable before. I don't think Sami Zayn has. I don't think we've seen Gable and Zayn yet because they've always both been heels. Zayn's been heel for forever, and Gable wasn't. I don't think we've ever seen Gable and Zayn in the same ring in like a tag team match or a singles match before. But Owens and Zayn against Alpha Academy would be a pretty good match though. And let's see. His next question, kind of going off the Gunther one from earlier. Do you think that Gunther should retain the IC title or should Drew McIntyre win the title from him? I think Gunther should break the record. I mean, you've come so far, and I've said before, like, what do these records even mean? But, like, this is a record that will be very hard to top. I don't know if anyone will ever hold the Intercontinental Championship again for this long. Like, over a year, a year and a half, whatever. And it hasn't been a year and a half, but, like, 14 months? I mean, how often does that happen? It never does. It never does. It hasn't happened in decades. I would just keep the championship on Gunther. He breaks the record in early September. I would say I don't give a shit about the record if Sheamus was about to win it at WrestleMania. You were far enough from breaking it where I would have been fine with him losing it at that point. He would have held the title for 9 months. It would have been great. Okay, cool. But at this point, I said at the time, if he were to retain at WrestleMania, which he did, and I didn't want him to, I would have rather Sheamus won it there. But if he's going to win at WrestleMania, they have to go all the way. They have to make this worth it. Because if Drew just ends up winning it, then having him hold it hasn't been a waste, but it's kind of been a waste. He really should have just fucking lost it at WrestleMania. To Sheamus and not the Drew. I don't think Drew should win it, period. Even if Gunther breaks the record and they want to have him hold on to it until he breaks it and then he loses it to Drew, I wouldn't have him lose it to Drew anyway. I would have him, like I said earlier, have him lose it. I would rather have him lose it to someone who can benefit. Drew would not benefit. It would keep him busy. He's the top name, and like, okay, you give these mid-card titles new life by giving it to main eventers, that's great. But there's going to come a time when it goes back to a mid-carder, and then it goes back to meaning nothing. I would rather someone like a Gargano benefit from beating Gunther than Drew McIntyre, who's already beaten Gunther. He already pinned Gunther at Survivor Series 2019, which they haven't acknowledged. They probably won't acknowledge. Maybe because it was Walter, it doesn't count. I don't know. I kid. But I don't think Drew should beat him for the championship. I think Gunther should retain at SummerSlam. He should continue to retain until he breaks the record in early September. We're so close. Why not? At noob_n_co TV, their first question was, so it seems like we're going to have Tribal Combat at SummerSlam, but my question is, what is Tribal Combat, and what are the rules of it? No one really seems to know. I mean, after going back and listening to it, I didn't think they even said what it was, or like even alluded to it during that segment on SmackDown, but they did. They said, or Jey Uso said that it's like no DQ, you can use weapons, blah, blah, blah. Didn't exactly make that clear, like if the elders will be involved. Like they said something about the elders and they had to approve. I don't know if they're there. I really don't know. I hope they did that on purpose and they intend to explain exactly what that is this week on SmackDown, if not next week. Hopefully this week. Because next week would be a day before the pay-per-view. I assume it's just it's their fancy way of calling it a no disqualification match. It would be nice if they ensured there'd be no interference, but it's a Roman Reigns match. We know there's going to be interference. But I don't think anyone really knows for a fact what this match is going to be, aside from the fact that anything goes. I think Jey Uso said that a time or two, The commentators didn't really make that clear. Jey Uso alluded to it, but the commentators just said tribal combat. Again, what the fuck does that even mean? I have no idea. Their second question, on Raw, we heard that Shayna Baszler doesn't want a match with Ronda Rousey, but a fight. Are we getting a fight pit match between Shayna and Ronda Rousey at SummerSlam? That's what I took it to mean, but that wasn't confirmed. I think it's still a regular match as of now. I mean, if they just keep it a regular match and they just kind of play it up as a fight, that's stupid. I mean, the funny thing is that the matches that should have stipulations don't, like Brock and Cody and Rollins and Balor. Those are matches we've seen multiple times already this year. I don't want to see a standard singles match with those matches. Those should have stipulations. Shayna and Ronda in a fight pit is great, but the funny thing is that the feud just started, and I assume it's a one and done. Shayna wins and we move on. I mean, whatever. I'll take a fight pit with these two because it makes sense. They come from the MMA world. It would be cool. We haven't seen a women's fight pit match before. We've had 3 so far in WWE. They've all been men's matches, 2 in NXT, 1 last year at Extreme Rules with Rollins and Riddle. Again, they haven't confirmed that yet. I hope they do confirm that next week because a fight pit match with those two, I'm not saying it would be guaranteed to be great. It could be just fucking awful and boring. That Rollins and Riddle one was good, but it wasn't super exciting. With these two, it could be even worse. I mean, Ronda's matches are very hit or miss. Shayna can be boring at times, so who knows? But if they go in there and beat the shit out of each other, that could be entertaining. I'm just not expecting it. I don't know. I'm not really sure what to expect. But I would love to see a fight pit match. It's more a matter of if they make it official next week on Raw. And I hope they do. At It's Bergen from Twitter, you can run WrestleMania in one stadium in the U.S. that hasn't been used yet. Which stadium do you choose? You know, I'm not good with these questions, but I did have an answer right off the bat as soon as I read your question. Allegiant Stadium in Vegas. Now, if you mean that WrestleMania, a stadium that WrestleMania hasn't used, then Allegiant Stadium. WWE has run Allegiant Stadium before for SummerSlam back in 2021. And the funny thing is that I was never a big Vegas guy. I never really wanted to go to Vegas. I was in Vegas in 2019 for Double or Nothing. It was all right. For whatever reason, I went back in 2021 for SummerSlam, last-minute trip, and had a great time. I was there for several days, almost a week actually, and just loved how close everything was and being able to walk down the strip and whatever. I'm not a big drinker, partier, gambler, smoker, whatever. I don't really do any of that stuff at all. But just being able to walk down the strip and everything was within close proximity, and going to the arena, which wasn't far, you could walk there. It was great, and the weather was fine, so I would probably go Allegiant. I would love to see Mania in Vegas. I don't think they'll be there anytime soon. I know Fightful reported the other day that they're looking at Minneapolis, I think, for Mania 41. That's somewhere I've never been before, so I would not be opposed to that either. I don't know how cold it would be in April or March for Mania in Minneapolis, but, I mean, they've also had it here in fucking April, and it was pretty cold. When I say here, I mean, like, the Northeast in Newark, in New York, New Jersey in 2013 and 2019, which is when I went. It was pretty fucking cold then, too. But anyway, I would probably go Vegas. I think Allegiant Stadium for a Mania would be great, and hopefully they go back there at some point. At Kyle Rochelle 19, who is Rhea Ripley going to face at SummerSlam now? How do you feel about Judgment Day running Raw? Should Finn Balor win the World Heavyweight Championship? All right, 3 questions in one. First question, Rhea Ripley facing at SummerSlam. She's facing Raquel. Raquel's not actually hurt. That was a storyline injury. They haven't made that match official for the pay-per-view yet. There's one Raw left before the show. So I'm hoping Raquel comes back next week. She's pissed at Rhea for injuring Liv, which is a shoot injury, I believe. And then Rhea faces Raquel. So I think Rhea and Raquel will still happen at SummerSlam, but if they think the card has too many matches, they might not do it. But I would put it on the show because 4 women's matches at that pay-per-view would be great. 3 of those are pretty much already confirmed. And Rhea hasn't defended on pay-per-view since Night of Champions. She wasn't on Money in the Bank. So she probably should defend at SummerSlam. And her and Raquel make sense. So it's most likely going to be Rhea and Raquel on that show. How do you feel about Judgment Day running Raw? I think it's great because I love the group. They're very entertaining. It's a complete 180 from what they were doing a year ago. And I enjoyed Judgment Day even then, but I liked Edge running it, but they're just a much more exciting, entertaining group, better booked, 10 times better than what it was a year ago when Edge was in charge and soon after he left the group. I love Judgment Day running Raw. They just got to be careful to not overexpose the group by putting them all over Raw and then NXT and SmackDown as well. Like, people, if they aren't already, will get sick of the group. So you don't want to just run that risk of souring people on the group or ruining a good thing. You don't want that to happen, especially on a 3-hour show. It's one thing when they do it with the Bloodline on SmackDown, which is a multi-year story thread, whatever. but it's a 2-hour show. Having Judgment Day run Raw for 3 hours and then also appear on NXT and SmackDown is a little much. So they got to be careful there. And then their third question, should Finn Balor win the World Heavyweight Championship? No, I don't think he should, but it is possible. I mean, if Balor does win the world title, then you have Priest with the briefcase, Rhea with the women's title, Dominic with the North American title, assume he retains on Sunday, and then Balor with the World Heavyweight Championship. If Rollins is indeed hurt and he's got to take time off, then Balor winning the championship would make sense. I don't want to see that necessarily. Balor finally winning a world championship after however many years, since 2016, 7 years, which is crazy, would be a nice moment for him. I don't think they need the title. I don't think Rollins should lose it quite yet. There are more matches you can have as champion. So my answer there would be no. I mean, I guess you could then do Cody and Balor for the championship. I said earlier that Cody doesn't want to face Rollins ever again. He doesn't want to go for the World Heavyweight Championship. I mean, he should still go for the World Heavyweight Championship, not win it. But then it would become Cody and Balor and not Cody and Rollins. So it kind of fulfills that, I guess. I wouldn't be mad if he wins it, but I just don't think he needs to, and I don't think he should. It really is all a matter of where they go from there with it. At BillMeister88, their question was, if there could be one shock, one return, and one heel turn at SummerSlam, what would be your choices for all three? I mean, honestly, it would not be Jey Uso beating Roman Reigns. That would be a shock, but I don't think that needs to happen. I think, honestly, I don't know if it would be shocking, but Gunther beating Drew should happen. That to me has got to happen. The shock has got to be Gunther beating Drew. I think a lot of people expect Drew to win, myself included. I think Drew should lose to Gunther. Maybe he beats him down the road. Again, I wouldn't do that necessarily. But I think the one shock for me would be Gunther retaining. I don't know how shocking that would be, but for me it would be shocking. The heel turn thing? Who should turn heel? I was trying to think of that while I was coming up with your question. Let's see, SummerSlam, looking at what the card is for this show. Who can they turn heel that would make sense? Let's see. Ricochet, Logan Paul, Gunther, Drew, Asuka, Charlotte, Bianca. Maybe Bianca. Bianca going heel. Full-fledged heel would be great. I don't know how that would happen. I mean, she's already kind of a tweener anyway. But her snapping on... I mean, the funny thing is that she snaps on Charlotte, people will cheer. But that would, I guess, in storyline turn her heel because Charlotte's supposed to be a babyface, I think. Bianca, Asuka, and Charlotte all kind of feel like a Shades of Grey character, all three of them. But I would turn Bianca heel because that would be something new for her. And then the return, Randy Orton. It's got to be Randy Orton. I said Cena before, and Rock and Batista, could they have a role at some point? Maybe blah, blah, blah. But to me, it's got to be Randy Orton. A Randy Orton return would blow the roof off of Ford Field in Detroit for SummerSlam next week. And it'd be great. You could factor him into where he kind of left off with Riddle, maybe. Maybe he helps out Drew and Riddle against Imperium, leading to a 6-man on Raw or the next pay-per-view, whatever the fuck. That's what I would do. A Randy Orton return on that show would be awesome. Their next question, Bill's next question, you haven't traveled, or rather you have. He said you have traveled to many cities to cover wrestling. Where in the U.S. would you like to visit that you haven't, and where outside of the U.S. would you want to visit when covering an event? Good question. I've thought about this before as far as where else in the country that I haven't gone to before would I want to see a wrestling show and travel to? Because I've been to a lot of places already, from Chicago, California, Vegas, Texas. I don't know why I said SummerSlam. Texas, Florida, all across the Northeast. Two places not that I'm dying to go to, but I haven't been to before, and it would probably be cool to go there at some point for a show. New Orleans, even though I'm not a big drinker, partier, or whatever, that would still be a cool atmosphere, I think. New Orleans. And Arizona, Phoenix specifically. So Phoenix and New Orleans I've never been to before, and I think going to shows there would be fun. Like I said, they might be going to Minneapolis for Mania in a couple of years. I've never been to Minnesota before. That would be cool. So at some point there, that might be a city for the bucket list. For a place outside of the U.S., it would probably be London. It would definitely be London. It's always been on my bucket list to see a show in London. When I was in London a couple of years ago, it wasn't possible. But to go to a show there would be pretty sick. The funny thing is that WWE just had Money in the Bank there. AEW's having All In there. It wasn't in the cards for this year. But for down the road, I would love to see a show in London, cover a show in London. That's always been a big goal for probably since as long as I've been watching wrestling. Only because the first Raw that I really watched in full, where I kind of pinpoint where I became a wrestling fan, emanated from London. And I love the London crowds. I love the atmosphere. And I would love to go see a show whether it be at the O2 or Wembley or whatever the fuck. WWE, AEW, doesn't matter. In London at some point. I feel like my wrestling fandom at that point could go full circle by finally seeing a show in the same place that hosted my first ever full Raw as a wrestling fan. And his third question here, apologies if you've covered this previously, but what are your thoughts on the horrendous social media post of Ridge Holland on him, quote-unquote, injuring Elton Prince and forcing Ridge to deactivate his Twitter account? Do you think he is an unsafe worker? I don't think he's unsafe. I think he's inexperienced / still green. I think they called him up too soon. I know he's been in the system for a long time. He was in NXT for a while, or NXT UK for a while, NXT itself for a little bit. He also got hurt for a long time, too. He got hurt, I think, in 2020, and then he came back maybe in late 2021. He wasn't in NXT for that long before they brought him up to the main roster with Sheamus. So I feel like he could have used some more time in developmental. So no, I don't think he's unsafe. But between the Elton Prince thing and Big E, yeah, I mean, I think they're coincidences. I mean, like, Nia Jax had a series of people that she not inadvertently injured, but, like, it was like, she's just fucking terrible. Like, she's not doing it on purpose, and she's not, I don't know if she's unsafe necessarily. That's a pretty big claim to make, but she was just reckless. Ridge, he's got to slow stuff down, but the point is that no one should get hate for injuring anyone else by accident. Again, if it happens 5 or 6 times, that's a different story. 2 freak accidents with Elton Prince, who will be fine. He'll be back soon. The Big E thing was just a freak accident. The suplex, he could have died. That's not Ridge's fault. It's just shit that happens, and it was unfortunate. Ridge should not get any hate for that. He even said it at the time after he injured Big E. He was getting, like, posts calling him a racist and stuff like that. I think he was still on Twitter at that point. I guess now he's not. I haven't really seen that stuff. People, posting shit to Ridge and probably death threats and stuff, because that's how just people are and wrestling fans can be. It's just disgusting. No, none of that stuff is ever warranted. Unless they're, like, taking pride in it, which would be a problem, which he obviously is. And he seems like a good dude, and it was just an accident. So the fact that people are doing that is just fucking dumb, and that's just, it brings a bad name to wrestling fans. And there are other fandoms that would do that too, don't get me wrong. That's just how some people are on the internet, because they're just fucking stupid, and they live under a rock. But Ridge Holland specifically does not deserve that, and hopefully he'll be okay, and hopefully Elton Prince will be okay, and Big E will be okay, and everything will be fine. Last question from @E13A. Do you think LA Knight should feud with Grayson Waller? No, I know you were quote tweeting a tweet that was a joke, I believe. They had a great feud in NXT. They did. I would love to see an LA Knight Grayson Waller feud at some point. I have thought about this as far as, like, can they feud them now to kind of keep them busy? No, because both guys should be winning. Grayson Waller should win whatever he does next. He's now 0-2 in the main roster between the 4-way and the in-ring debut against Edge, which is fine, but he should be winning more. And LA Knight should also be winning. So Grayson Waller should be paired with someone that he can beat, and LA Knight should be paired with someone that he can beat. And at some point, you can revisit that on the main roster, and you can kind of say Grayson Waller. I don't think LA Knight has ever beaten Grayson Waller. Maybe he has. I don't remember him ever beating Grayson. I know they had a couple matches, including, I think, a last man standing match that Grayson Waller won. And they had a great feud. But not right now. I would not go back to that right now. And that's going to do it, guys, for episode 504 of #AskGSM for Wednesday, July 26, 2023. Thank you guys so much for checking out the show per usual. I appreciate it. Be sure to tweet questions and send questions into the show by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the #AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/graham.gsm.matthews. Drop a comment on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not on the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video. I'll include your question in next week's edition. Have a great one, folks. We'll be back next Wednesday with our first episode in the month of August. And already so close to SummerSlam as well, which is wild, and I will be there for that show. Should not affect hashtag. I'm leaving on Thursday, coming back that weekend, so hashtag should go unaffected. Again, guys, enjoy the week. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.